President Biden has been fairly restrained in response to Trump's felony conviction. He criticized Trump's rhetoric as reckless on Friday and then turned his focus back to a Middle East policy speech. This week, he is expected to take executive action to dramatically reduce asylum claims on the southern border. But not all Democrats are on board with that political strategy. My guest spent years investigating Trump during his presidency. And joining me now is California Democratic Senate candidate, Congressman Adam Schiff. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
So you heard what President Trump said this morning, and you just heard our interview there with Lara Trump. What's your response?
Well, first, in terms of Lara Trump's interview and her complaining about the case being tried in New York before a New York jury, if you don't want to be tried in front of a New York jury, then maybe don't commit so many crimes in New York City. It's pretty simple. And that jury was selected in part by Donald Trump and his attorneys. They vetted each of the jurors. He had every right that every other criminal defendant has in that courtroom. And they found, this ordinary jury of peers found him guilty on every single count. So if you don't want to be tried in New York, don't commit crimes in New York. But he got the same due process as any other person, and that's exactly the way it should be. In terms of Donald Trump's comments about whether the public reaches a breaking point if he is sentenced to jail time, this is clearly Donald Trump once again inciting violence, potential violence when he is sentenced. And Lara Trump may try to explain it away. We see this pattern over and over again where Donald Trump communicates with his base supporters, making it pretty clear what he wants to see, and then his enablers try to explain it away. But look, his base listens to him. They don't listen to Lara Trump. And this is another dangerous appeal to violence. And it is yet another reason why Americans are going to decide they don't want a convicted felon in the Oval Office. They don't want someone that has so little respect for the system of justice or our criminal laws that they're a convicted felon and then attack the system as a result.
Sir, you are a former prosecutor, experienced prosecutor. Now it's the judge that's going to have to decide the sentence for the former president, but the prosecutors in the case do have to ask for what they want. Do you think those prosecutors should be asking the judge to put Donald Trump in jail?
I think what the prosecutors should do, and for that matter what the judge should do, is look at what are the sentences given out in New York for like felons, people that have committed felonies of that nature that Donald Trump committed. They should recommend a sentence no greater or no less than any other citizen would get for committing those kind of crimes. Now, I do think the judge should consider, as any judge would against any defendant, has the defendant accepted responsibility? Have they shown remorse? Are they willing to make restitution? In this case, as you can see from the moment he stepped out of that courthouse, Donald Trump shows no acceptance of responsibility, and that ought to be weighed against him as the judge would against any American who's convicted on multiple counts and takes no responsibility.
Sir, considering that this sentencing is likely to occur just days before the start of the convention and months before he's to be the Republican nominee in November, do you think it would be dangerous for the country if Donald Trump were sentenced to jail?
No, I don't think it'll be dangerous for the country. And we have seen Trump urge mass protests outside the courthouse that never materialized. But nevertheless, this is, I think, what Donald Trump is aiming for. This is essentially his threat that if he gets jail time, that he's going to encourage his supporters to rise up. And we saw the very, deadly results of that on January 6th. So I don't think the public is going to respond to that call. I hope we learned something from the awful experience of January 6th. But it's very clear what Donald Trump is suggesting here. And this is something I think that the judge needs to take into consideration also, not to be intimidated by that threat, but as a further evidence, this defendant not only doesn't accept responsibility, but is willing to endanger people, just as Trump is willing to violate the gag order and potentially endanger witnesses or jurors or the judge himself or family members. That's something the judge ought to be considering.
Sir, you are the Democratic candidate for Senate in California, and President Biden's campaign has clearly tried to strike a balance between attacking President Trump over what's happened as a convicted felon while at the same time not going as aggressively as some on the left clearly would like him to be. I'm curious what you think. Should President Biden be leaning more into this message of Donald Trump being a convicted felon?
I think for the president, there's a time and a place for each argument. I think on the day of the conviction, the day thereafter, I can understand the president staying above the fray and demonstrating his respect and expressing his respect for the jury system. But I think the president should be leaning into this going forward. His competitor is a convicted felon. And you can only imagine if the situation was reversed, they would be going after Joe Biden with a vengeance. They're making those false claims about Joe Biden regardless. So I think not only the president, but Democrats need to be making the case forcefully to the American people. If you want something done about housing and how unaffordable it can be, you don't want a convicted felon in the Oval Office just looking out for themselves. You want something done about child care. You don't want a convicted felon in the Oval Office. You want the country run properly. You don't want a convicted felon to turn the Oval Office and the federal government into some kind of a racketeering operation. I think that's a powerful case to make, and certainly one supported by the verdict here.
Sir, do you think there's a world where this helps Donald Trump politically, this verdict, by increasing his supporters' fervor and interest in going to the polls?
I don't. It was amusing to watch Laura Trump make this so much about fundraising. She's very clearly with the fundraising, pleased with the fundraising, but that doesn't translate into votes. These are folks that were already for him, who may be more for him, but fine, they were voting for him anyway. But for average Americans, the idea of not just having someone they can't respect, not having someone that they don't feel is a decent, good human being in the Oval Office, someone that they would be ashamed of as president, but someone who's a convicted felon, to have them as the representative of America? No,
Right.
American people are not going to want that. And I don't think the fact you get more money out of your base, as Donald Trump is any reflection of the contrary.
Yeah. Sir, before I let you go, the trial of Hunter Biden begins tomorrow on gun-related charges. You, of course, have said the public should respect this verdict against Donald Trump. Should the public also respect the verdict against Hunter Biden, regardless of what it is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the president himself will respect the verdict, much as, it is painful, I'm sure, to see one of your children on trial. But yes, Americans should accept when a jury reaches a verdict, they should accept the result. That is part of our democracy. And really the anchor of our Constitution is the fact that ordinary citizens get to decide how the rule of law is applied to even the most powerful in our country. That's something we should be proud of.
All right, Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very much for your time this morning, sir. I appreciate it.